Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 62nd episode of the Exploring Antinatalism Podcast, a podcast all about the subject of antinatalism, created by antinatalists. My name is Amanda Oldphan Sukenick, formerly known as Foreverwolf Films on YouTube, and today I'm speaking with retired, tenured, full professor of education at Appalachian State University, former president of the National Association of Creative Children and Adults, as well as a host of other important professional credits as an educator, editor of several books about atheism by Dr Stahl, and author of such antinatalist works as The End of a Tragic Non-Event, The Moral Imperative for the Systematic Intentional Termination of Evolution, The Human Race is Actively Dying, and You're Born, You Suffer, You Die, Dr. Richard L. Stahl, Ph.D. Welcome to the Exploring Antinatalism Podcast, Richard.
Hello, Amanda. Nice to be here.
It's nice to have you, Richard. Thank you so much for doing this today. So, Richard, just to give our audience a little bit of context, I first learned about you on Twitter through Stop Having Kids. Our dear friend Dietz was selling copies of some of your books, and I was amazed because before that time, I had never seen them before, and I collect all things antinatalism, all books about antinatalism. So I absolutely had to get my hands on a couple of copies. You are quite a prolific author with a tremendous professional background in education. So I want to ask you all about that today. But before we get fully into it, just some basic questions, starting with, who is Dr. Richard L. Stahl, Ph.D.?
So I started junior college in Central Florida, and then I graduated from a Catholic high school in Sarasota, Cardinal Mooney High School. Then after my degree in psychology, BA, then I went into geology. I was hired as a geophysicist in New Orleans for Pan American Petroleum Company, which is an exploration division of Standard Oil of Illinois. And then I came back, got my master's degree in gifted education at the University of South Florida. And my major professor was Dorothy Sisk, who became the director of the U.S. Office of Education, Gifted and Talented. And she was also president of the National Association. So she was a great mentor. Then I taught math and physics and that at a small academy, the oldest private high school academy in Florida, Mount Verde Academy outside of Orlando. Then I got my Ph.D. at Florida State in education administration with supporting areas in research, statistics, curriculum, supervision, and instructional systems. And then Appalachian State University hired me to set up a gifted program in North Carolina because there was none in North Carolina. So I established the North Carolina Association for Gifted and Talented, which was, I think they said, the third largest in the country at that time with 1,200 members. I was president for 5 years, and then I sort of moved on. And then I started the first teacher training program to train teachers of the gifted and talented in the state of North Carolina, and also the first certification program in the history of North Carolina to certify teachers. And then, unfortunately, the university actually told me that there weren't any gifted children. And I thought, so they dropped the program, so I ended up just doing some other things, teaching algebra and trig and statistics and things like that. But I taught, and then I retired in 2000, and so now I've just been traveling and enjoying myself. And then some people created problems for me, like they usually do when you have somebody that's esoteric, and so anyway, I just continue reading astrophysics, and then I go up to the World Science Festival every year up in New York, which has started in 2008. Brian Greene's a friend, and his wife. He wrote numerous books on astrophysics, string theory, The Elegant Universe, which is on HBO, and the Fabric of the Cosmos, and that. So. I met Nobel Prize winners, and I tried to stay in contact with them. And I met the people who discovered the image of the first black hole. And then I met James Watson, the crick, the DNA. So I just spent the last 22 years researching and studying astrophysics and where the universe came from, and then I think all the way up until today, which is basically humans being around for 200,000 years, and sort of seeing why humans are still not learning from all the science. They seem to just sort of still be coming out of the caves. I like intelligent people. I like to be around intelligent people, so they're rare to find, but when I find one, I try to befriend them, and then hopefully befriending me, so I can pick their brains.
No, thank you for all of those details. You've really had an incredible career, and it's really quite something to hear about everything that you've done. Richard, let me ask you this: why are you an antinatalist?
Well, I never actually heard the term until I met you. So I thought, this person called me up and they use this here. I thought it was anti-naturalism or something like that. So I showed it to somebody who was a philosopher. He was just teaching philosophy at Duke University when I was coming back from New York last week. And I said, here's this Amanda person. And she said, oh, it's anti-natalism. I said, oh. How stupid, I said, so I just glanced at it because I have dyslexia. And so I said, oh, now it makes all kinds of sense. So, but then I started reading about it, and it seems like it's right there with atheism, because it just needs a little bit of, the beginning of the universe type of thing, where it all leads up to more substantial. Because if there's no God, then it makes sense to, why keep procreating? And people die, and I read in the past, it's been in the newspaper, in the news, the science news, that they figured that there's been 112 billion people, sentient individuals that have lived on this planet, like you and I, talking and communicating, and that, the question I have is that, there's about 7.8 billion now, but just say 7 billion. I ask people, where's the other 105 billion people? And then they say, well, and I said, well, this God must have a very low self-esteem if it needs 112 billion angels to praise it for the rest of eternity, just to build up its ego. And then also, why aren't people just born, grown up? Why do they have to go through all these stages? And so to me, it's just just a waste of. It doesn't make any sense, because we don't even know where those 105 billion people are, and we're going to be part of that unfortunate number.
Well, that's just so wild that you hadn't, you've been writing about this idea essentially for such a long period of time, but have just now come across the word. Yeah, how far back have you been thinking about this idea, regardless of having, a word to attach to it?
Well, actually, it was sort of odd. I almost feel like an alien in a way, but in a different way. When I was at 4.5, I sort of became aware of my existence. And I sort of woke up one day, and looked around, and I thought, it was like somebody coming down from another planet. I looked around and I said, what is this all about? I started feeling my hands and that, and said, what is this place? So a neighbor came over. I was 4.5. This neighbor came over, and I thought, well, I need to find out who the brightest people or entities are, in this place. And so this neighbor kept to come by, and I said, hey, where can I go to meet the most intelligent people on this planet, and this place? And they said, well, at a university. And I said, well, what do I need to do to get there? And they said, a Ph.D. I said, okay. And that was it. So from then on, I just observed the planet and the universe as, here I am looking around. Most people sort of don't even get to that point. So I just observed and observed. And then when I was about 8 years of age, we lived on a small farm. I had a accident where I fell 10 feet in a barn, straight down on a concrete head first, on a concrete slab. And I got up and I looked around and I thought, I'm supposed to be dead, and And so I reached on my face and I just put my hand on my head and I felt something wet and I looked down and there's all this red stuff. And so I looked at it and I thought, I guess that's blood. I guess I'm supposed to cry. So I started crying, even though I was, pretending I was just trying to cry. I went up and told my mother, and they took me to the doctor. Well, I was talking, I was in the third grade. I was talking well, talking like everyone else. But then 2 weeks later, I had a little hesitation in my voice. And 2 weeks later, after that, another hesitation. By 3 months, I couldn't talk. So I had a severe speech impediment from the third grade until I was in high school. I was 18, and this Catholic priest down in Sarasota said he had the same problem. He had 163 IQ level, and his parents took him way back when, in the 40s, to a speech pathologist. So he said, well, Richard, you can't just continue not being able to talk. And people would laugh at me in school and all that. And I thought, well, okay, so I went to 2 speech therapists for three times a week, and after 3 months, I was able to start talking, and then I never stopped. I guess I'm afraid if I stopped, I won't talk again. But I still have a speech impediment. People still laugh at me behind my back, but I don't care because I went through all those years not being able to speak at all, and so to become a teacher and have the not being able to talk all those years. So I had no social life basically, except for 1 or 2 friends, and that was it. So, but I didn't feel bad about it because I sort of wanted to just be an observer all those years. So that's where it all started. It just continued on through university and then astrophysics, and I connected up with some friends, like Dr Stahl, astrophysics and that, and then it helped me find out where this whole thing came from the very beginning. So I kept going back and back and back until the Big Bang, and then before the Big Bang. Now the James Webb telescope is going to take us back to almost the moment of the universe coming into existence. And all the research shows that all the top scientists and Nobel Prize winners I've spoken with all say, in the last 13.8 billion or 13.77 billion years, there has not been one instance ever in these 13.7 or 8 billion years that there's been any influence by any outside force, any influence from outside. So you think, well, there's no purpose to the universe. I mean, because a purpose would mean that some entity, human or otherwise, had to plan. They had to plan set out a plan, and then like building a car, you set up the blueprints and the plan and all the science and physics and everything, gasoline and carburetors, and then when it's built, it has a purpose to move a person from one place to another. And then I found out from some philosophers and scientists that there's only humans can ascribe meaning to anything, and so there's no absolute meaning in the universe. There's no purpose. So therefore, but you can't say there's no meaning. Only a human can, or a sentient being could ascribe meaning. So if as we know, you can take one object and have 10 people or 100 people describe that. They're all going to see it have a different meaning to that one object. So meaning is relative, and so therefore there's no real abstract meaning to the universe and purpose. So therefore, why create more entities? I like the word create now, entities, the humans, because a person is actually creating those entities by procreating in a way. But even though they don't have much choice in the outcome, what kind of child they're going to end up with.
Exactly, and right, exactly, and and all the while, it's coming at this huge expense, right? It's coming at the expense of all of this suffering, and
yes. The suffering just and I wrote one of my books. And I think you asked me in your questions that why so many titles? I have like 8 titles to one context. But I would talk to one person, and no one, I think no one's ever done that in the history of writing books, in the whole history of humans, is that they would take the same content and have even two titles to the same context. And what I thought is that there's different audiences, and so some person who is very religious would I happen to do a lot of when I do a lot of reading, I just things pop up. And then I saw Billy Graham. He said, he had a famous quote and it said, "You're born, you suffer, you die," by Billy Graham. I thought, this has got to be on the front of one. I'm going to put another book out and just change the title. So Christians who love Billy Graham, and Billy Graham was, lived in North Carolina where I live. He's buried in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he died in Black Mountain, North Carolina, near Asheville. But and his son, Franklin Graham, lives in Boone, where I live. And he has Samaritan's Purse, which is world renowned helping people. And Samaritan's Purse is about 2 miles away, Samaritan's Purse, which is helping out in Ukraine and all that. So I figured, well, all these Billy Graham people around, they love him. And so why not have a title, "You're born, you suffer, you die," quote, Billy Graham. And then I saw another one that said, I was watching George Carlin, and everybody loves George Carlin, and they even mentioned a couple of days ago that he had died, just a few years ago. But George Carlin, they said his humor, even the other comedians said his humor is so accurate that 100 years from now it'll still be relevant, but their material would not be. So, and I have all of his CDs and HBO specials, and one of them he said, humans are mildly civilized savages. And that stuck in my mind. I thought, wow, and I'd never thought about it. I was trying to figure out how to describe that. And then all these years, just in my mind, the back of my mind, he said it perfectly. Humans are mildly civilized savages. And then I thought, and then he said, they have about 100 different ways of killing each other. Humans are the only ones that kill each other, and they actually have incredible ways. Even as in his HBO special, he talks about boiling people in water and starving them to death and crucifying them. He just went on and on. He said, humans are very creative. They can they have hundreds of ways that are bizarre ways of killing each other. And he said. If electricity went out in New York or in the country, people would be going out of prisons. They would be killing each other in the streets. And then what happened just a couple of years ago in New York and in Portland, Oregon, and those places where, they just went down killing and burning and everything over, and they just had to have an excuse. Even this guy Floyd, he was a bad guy. He beat women and he was on drugs and everything, but he didn't resist and that, and so they just needed that little spark to excuse to do all these things and become savages again, and they killed. And so to me, I thought, well, that would be a nice cover for a book, So I put that because then people that I run into, and they say, oh, there's terrible people that went up in New York and Portland, and they're burning libraries down, they're burning all this stuff, and then the January 6th thing going into the Capitol, they just need an excuse because their brains are wired to hurt people and destroy things, and so they mildly civilized savages, people can relate to it. It's not something you did back in medieval times or the killing. And then I read another article, and we started doing some research, and they said that 100 million people have died in the history of the world in wars, killing each other. We're talking about, bayonets and stabbing and dying from gangrene, and there were 65,000 people that died like in 3 days at Gettysburg. They were so piled high, they had to crawl over mounds of dead soldiers to continue killing the other side. So it's just, and then a lot of these wars were just never So the whole thing, the whole thing doesn't make it. We're not getting any better, I don't think. And then Stephen Pinker wrote a book. I read some article that said he's one of the top 20 most brilliant people living today. And he wrote a book about how humans are becoming less violent over the last 10,000 years or something. And so I saw Pinker up. I met him up in New York at the World Science Festival a few years ago. And I came up to him. I said, Stephen, I said, I'm writing a book on it's immoral to have children and procreate. So he just wrote this book, on how everything's improving. So I wanted to, and of course he has children, I think, my understanding. And so I think, these people don't want to say, here I am 40 or 50 years of age and I had children and I must be really stupid not to see that I should have not had them. And so they can't go home to their children, their wives, and say, we shouldn't have had these children. Because the children don't, they don't usually take that very well. So I said, there's no purpose, and only people can have, sentient humans can have ascribe meaning to things. And I said, I was expecting him to say, well, that's correct. He said, oh, no, you should have children. Not a problem. He said, and I said, well, how can you do that? It's immoral. And they're never asked to be born. And he said, oh, well, you have children and let them grow up and then they can ascribe their own meaning to things in their life. I said, and I was thinking, you're supposed to be one of the top 20 most brilliant geniuses living today. And so there's this other person, there was an anthropologist that just discovered this new species of humans down in South Africa. And he was there because it was a major discovery at the World Science Festival. I asked him the same thing. And he has children. And I thought, here he is out there discovering these skeletons of this new species of humans. And so they showed a picture of him in the news and National Geographic everywhere holding the skull, this little tiny skull. And I was thinking, doesn't he look at this and say, and he's one of the top anthropologists in the world, look at this and say, there was a human being in this skull? It's now dead. Where is it? Asking just simple questions. And he said the same thing. He said, I don't want to talk about it. I said, but it's immoral to procreate. I mean, it's just simple logic. It's not something, that I thought of. And he said, I don't want to talk about it. And he walked off. See, so he didn't want to even entertain because he knew, he was wrong. But these are the people we have to depend on, the top scientists. There was a scientist, he died, astrophysicist, and his name is Dr. Victor Stenger, Stenger, and he's absolutely genius, brilliant, and he was at the University of Colorado, Northern Colorado, but he died, and he wrote numerous books on astrophysics. He was considered one of the top astrophysicists in the history of the humans, and he wrote a book on God in the multiverse, and he had a number of books about atheism and God. And I called him up and talked to him one time, and we were going to have lunch. And then by the time I thought I'll be up there in August or sometime, or October or so. Someone else told me, he had died after I had spoken. So, but there were two people. You were in your questions. I'm probably talking a lot, but there's two people you might want to contact about maybe trying to get this anti-natalism into the Oxford and other dictionaries. You can even get it in a small dictionary and then tell Oxford, well, these other two dictionaries have it, so why can't you? So you do it indirectly. But Dr. Richard Dawkins, he's still going around. He had a stroke, I think, a few years ago down in Australia, but he's in Oxford, I guess, or Cambridge, or I think Oxford. And so, he's up in age. He's probably 81 or 82 now, but he would be a person that would be that you might want to contact, or have somebody over there contact, say, how can we get this in the dictionary And then also Lawrence Krauss is a friend of mine, and Lawrence wrote a number of best-selling books on astrophysics and that. I'm trying to encourage him now to do one on neutrinos because he's a world expert on neutrinos. No one knows more than Lawrence, but he and Richard Dawkins actually went around the world giving talks on atheism, and Lawrence is I think would be amenable to at least giving some ideas on how to get it, because he's written a number of books, one on global warming, actually global climate change recently, and but he and Richard Dawkins would travel around the world, and there'd be just two of them on stage, and then Lawrence would ask. They're both atheists, and so they would pick each other's brain on different aspects of atheism and that. So he would be a good person too, and I can give you his phone number and his address. But so there was there's at least two of the titles, maybe three of the titles that I had on my books and that. But there are different audiences, and if you bought a book, you say, well, you're born, you suffer, you die. If you're a Christian, you say, oh, I'm going to buy that book. But then this other book, the whole system is based on suffering. You probably wouldn't buy that book. But the people that would buy that book would not buy the Billy Graham thing. So it's just, or the mildly civilized savages. You probably wouldn't buy that book. So the people that would buy it. So I've got enough books out there. So when I meet somebody, they say, we start chatting. I go, oh, here's a book for you. But I pick up the book and give them a copy of the book that relates to what their mindset is. So it's not trying to make money. I don't even care if I make money out of the book. I want to just have books that I can hand to people or send to people that they can read it, just because they're sort of wanting to know what's happening in the universe and why all these terrible things are happening in Ukraine and different places like that.
Yeah, no, it's very, very smart. I mean, how you make the argument and all the different ways that you can sort of insert the argument in where people least expect it is sort of the utmost importance, I mean, and so I think that it's very, very, very smart to repackage the same thing over and over again in as many ways as you can, because as you're saying, even the smartest people in the world don't want to talk about this, that to say nothing of regular people.
And the religion thing is really something, religion is, prevented people, but I came to there's this Catholic priest that was head of the church down in Sarasota. He was the principal president. But he said, I said, what is the Catholic Church over concerned about people's sex? I mean, having sex and things like that. And he said he had 163 IQ level, and if relatively brilliant. And he said simply, which shocked me in a way. He said, well, when you're in Rome, and you're the Pope, and you can control what a person does sexually in their bedroom, behind closed doors, 12,000 miles away. He said, you don't give up that power for anything. He said, right. That's why the church is so. Yeah, that's why it's so obsessed with people having sex and that, and different types of sex and all that. And he said when you have that kind of power, so that even goes like beyond ethics and morals and that. They just want to control, and so if they can control that, then they go the next step and control everything else about their lives. So I thought that was sort of amazing coming from a Catholic priest.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard, I'm really intrigued about all this work that you did in the past with gifted children. I mean, you've spoken a little bit about that already, but did working with so many brilliant kids, influence your thinking on the ethics of procreation? I mean, because it's interesting how in a lot of people's minds, producing the best and the brightest is licensed to do it, right? Like you might get a genius, so keep popping them out. But it's really interesting to find somebody who has worked with so many brilliant children and yet still come to the conclusion that, producing even the best and the brightest is immoral.
Yeah, it's amazing because I was the director of the master's degree program, and there's one of the students, and and she was very intelligent, and so I said she was in the internship and taking courses and that. And I tell them, at the very beginning of the class, there's no God, and so a lot of them, typical teachers will go and run to the chairperson of the department and say, "We're in the Bible about this guy is saying there's no God. What how do you keep him hired here and all that?" But there's one that was in the gifted program. She was working on a master's degree, and she was teaching gifted children for years in public schools. And so I saw she's pregnant, and I said, this is a couple years after I met her, and then I said, didn't you learn anything from my course? And I said, there is no God, there is a meaning of that. And she said, well, yes, I totally agree, and I support it. Yeah, I support what you said. And but I feel like I'm an intelligent person. She was an intelligent person, she said, and that the universe, the world needs more intelligent people to be able to share ideas and that with other people. I said, there's I mean, at that time, there's 6 billion people. There's enough geniuses and brilliant people to solve any problems we need. We don't need more. But she just needed an excuse to have more children. But I said, 6 children? I mean, give me a break, And then if you notice lately, Alex Baldwin, he's up in age, and he starts going for physical therapy at some yoga place or some place until he falls in love with this young 30-some-year-old yoga teacher. And now they've been married for like 8 years, and she's pregnant with her 7th or 8th child. He's like in his 50s. I mean, what goes on in somebody's mind like that? He's an intelligent person. But anyway, one of the children we found up in the mountains here, I sort of discovered, is that he had a 200 plus IQ level, and we got invited to the White House with Jimmy Carter and the NASA people invited him to a special tour of the Air and Space Museum because he wanted to work for NASA. And we met Mike Collins, who's an astronaut, and then we were in Reader's Digest, the prodigy from Plumtree with a 200 plus IQ. They couldn't even measure it. He was composing his Second Symphony at 11. He was reading the newspaper at 2.5. And he called me up when he took the GRE, the graduate record exam. And he said he always called me Dr. Stahl, even though we knew each other for years. I knew him. I guess I first met him when he was like 7.5. He said, I took the GRE and I made 1,600 was the most possible. He said, I made a 1,596. You think I should take it over again and make a perfect score? And he wasn't bragging. He was just, and I said, no, I think you probably have enough to get into to Chapel Hill at the University of Chapel Hill. And so, but these people are just so incredibly brilliant. And the interesting thing, they're all in different areas. One's in art, one's in music, one's composing, one's in literature, one's in physics, one's in different areas. And you've heard of the Nobel Prize, right? Well, they have them in, of course you do. You've seen mathematics. There's physics and medicine and chemistry and that, and biology, but there's none in mathematics. And mathematics is an underlying basis for everything. Well, someone told me in the math department a couple months ago. I said, well, you know why there's no Nobel? He invented dynamite, and so and then he didn't realize it was going to be used. Didn't expect to be used to hurt people. So he started the Nobel Prize. Well, he was figuring out, well, we'll do one in physics. So he wanted to make a contribution to rectify that. So he started the Nobel Prize in physics and chemistry and biology and but then he didn't do one in math. Well, they found out that his wife was having an affair with their friend who was in the math department professor. And so to get back at that, he didn't have one in mathematics. I mean, how bizarre is that? But anyways, these children are very unique in their, and we found out that there's a low correlation between high IQ, which is the idea of the being able to manipulate abstract concepts, and creativity. The correlation between the two is almost like 1.5, 2.20, which is almost zero. So a person can have high IQ, but also be very low in creativity. A person can be very high in creativity and be very low in mathematics. So I mean, in low IQ. So there's sort of like and that's just two different talents. They actually called it multi-talent development. In the late 70s and 80s, they switched over because. So a person can have 190 IQ, but they can be very low in creativity. So you can't predict one from the other. But then they went and saw other type of talents. And so there's like 10,000 different talents a person could have. So a person could be like excellent at composing music, like Phantom of the Opera, and so there's but they may not be able to play the piano, the guitar, or they might be able to play the flute, but they can't play the clarinet. And they could be geniuses in these areas, but you say, well, if they can compose music, why can't they play that instrument? Or, and then, in same way, somebody else could do, one area like, like Edgar Allan Poe, but, he can't, he probably can't write he probably can't, again, play the piano or paint something or be a scientist or understand chemistry or and so so what I gather from working with all these gifted children, they're all unique, and in a way they're all special in the area of the creativity and that, but they can get messed up by other children making fun of them when they're young, not like. And then what I used to give these talks to maybe 300 or 400 or 500 teachers at a time in an audience, and I would say, and of course there's no gifted women. Now you can imagine the teachers going, they're all women. Of course, there are no, I've talked about these gifted, children, these boys and the men scientists and all that. And I said, you're probably asking why, and I get asked why there's no gifted women. I said, well, there are none. And the teachers, stand up and they start, almost ready to walk out. And they say, how can you say that? How can you say that? I said, well, there are very brilliant, gifted women and geniuses, just as many as men, but women know how to hide it.
Interesting.
And so I said, no little boy in elementary or junior high or high school is going to want to go out with a girl who's smarter than them. So women have to pretend that even when they're very young, they have to hide their intelligence so they can have a boyfriend. And I said, this continues on for years and years, and some women just break out of it, or they end up getting married and having children just so they can have a husband that they can sort of communicate with. And the research shows also that that people associate with other people and their friends in that who are on their own intellectual level, not their emotional level. And so you see these little children who, like Joe Hall, he was 7.5, but we got him into some university programs at the university in science, where he was communicating with professors with Ph.D s, and he was on their own same level, even though he was 7.5. And so, but his friends are usually scientists and older people, because so most people think if you're 7 years of age, you should be associating with your friends who are in the 7th grade level emotionally. But these children, even though they may be emotionally immature at 7, their mental level and the communication are with people much older. So So this is confusing for these children. I have to explain it to them, their parents. I say, your child is still emotionally a 7-year-old or a 12-year-old, but their mental ability and who they want to communicate with is on 4 or 5 or 10 years. Even in high school, there's seventh graders associate with seniors because that's the mental level. When parents come in, they'll have two children. They say, Dr. Stahl, we need your help. We're having problems with our children. We're having children. I said, well, tell me about your children. And this almost 100%, it happens every time. And I'll say, well, tell me something about your children. Well, we have two children. I said, okay, one's a boy, one's a girl, or two boys, two girls. I said, okay. They said, well, this one is, we don't even have much of a problem, but the other one, is just sort of driving us crazy. I said, well, what happens is one of your children is high, they're making straight A's, and the parents nod. I said, making straight A's, they're conforming, they're convergent, and they're making straight A's, no problems. And they said, well, yes. And I said, now the other one is non-convergent and non-conforming and creative and is bouncing off the walls. And they said, well, how did you know that? I said, because one is convergent for conforming and the other one is creative. So I said, they're both equally good. I said, you don't want it to control this child who's creative, because that's where their art and music and creativity comes from. And they're both equally, but one's off the scale here, one's off here. But the little boy who's making straight A's, or the one's making straight A's, can't compute the other person because they have very little creativity. But the other one has creativity and is not going to make it. And I said, the other one is probably making B's and C's and that. I said, well, yes, we can't get that person to make A's. I said, but it doesn't make any difference because that person will pick up whatever they need to be successful.
I mean, one of the things that I appreciate most about your antinatalist work is your incredible commitment to atheism. It's very similar to how I was originally exposed to this philosophy. Coming at it from an evolutionary point of view. And I was wondering if you could tell us. You've already described this to some degree, but how you feel antinatalism intersects with atheism, but also with other social and ethical issues like the right to die and veganism. I don't know if I don't know if you are vegan or if you are an animal rights activist at the same time, but I'm curious what you think about those connections.
Oh, absolutely. It would go back to the beginning of the universe, and you work your way, in a billion years, next billion years, no interference by any outside force, supernatural or otherwise, that cannot be explained by just the laws of physics and that. And then you get to the point of saying, well, if there's no purpose in the universe, then then you look around to say, well, what if everything is okay? Then no need to change anything. If people lived forever, which would be perfect on a huge planet that would be beautiful with deers and and squirrels and birds and everything, it'd be beautiful if we lived forever, and we had no pain or suffering in that. But to get to a point where you look around and you say suffering and whatever. And so there's no supernatural being, and the universe, even with the astrophysicists, I say the universe did not evolve because it didn't struggle. It wasn't the survival of the one galaxy survived more than another galaxy. It unfolded from the laws of physics. Now, when you get to a certain point, you're saying, okay, there's nothing in the future except more, the sun's going 3 billion years, the sun's going to expand and the earth is going to be burned up. And then there's asteroids hitting, 65 billion years or 66 billion years ago. There's other things that have happened in mass extinctions. We're up to 90%, in some places 99% of living organisms became extinct. And then there's like 5 different extinctions occurred. And then there's one person, her name is Kohler, K-O, HLER, I think it was. But she just wrote a book. She wrote a book just a few years ago on the it's called the Sixth Extinction, where humans were just basically, global warming and climate change and overpopulation, when people would just, become extinct that way on their own. And so I was thinking, well, why not write a book called The Seventh Extinction, which where humans reach a level at some point where they get together and they say, enough is enough. We need to not procreate. We need to get this under control, have less suffering, less pain in that. And so they said that if they got together and said, as a civilization or as a global, saying, with obviously the scientists many years ago have proven that there's no God, there's no outside force, there's no future, we're all going to die. There's 105 billion people that have died. This is all facts. We're killing each other. And so why not just not procreate? And the anti-natalism, you say this falls right into that, because that's exactly not procreating. And so to be an atheist gives the reason from the science that there is no purpose in the whole thing, and that only humans can give meaning to the whole thing. So everybody has a different meaning to the same problem. So you can't depend on that. So being an atheist, being justified by the 13.8 billion years of nothing except planets blowing up, and stars blowing up in supernovas, and nothing changing in the future, then so that ends up with an atheism, no God, no purpose, only humans give meaning. So there's no logical, moral reason to continue procreating. So natalism is children, new life, and so that falls right into the big logic. And David Bentar, he sort of like starts way over here at the end, because he's not putting in the science of 13 point. He starts here and continues on by just simple logic of suffering and pain, and preventing new life to be created. And there's some other things about the veganism. Okay, and I've got something here. I sent this to you in the mail, I think, but it said, but in the United States alone, we go out and look at little birds and squirrels and all that, and oh, look, there's a robin, all that. There's a cardinal, and there's but in the United States, and we like cats. People always, have dogs or cats in their home. And I tell people, we want to have. They say they want to have children. Say, get a dog, get a cat. Something that's already alive, that's in a kennel, suffering, and needs caring. So I thought, well, this is it. But then I read that they calculated that in the United States, cats kill 50 billion birds a year in the United States. 50 billion birds are eaten alive by cats that we don't even see at night in different places and that. And even if one bird is killed by one cat in the history of humans, that's one too much, because that little bird was eaten alive. And then that each year in the United States, just to feed the people, and you can talk about the veganism, we kill, slaughter 1.5 billion pigs in this country a year, and let's see, 50 billion chickens are slaughtered, and even one cow, and some of these cattle up in Chicago, they kill these cattle. They shoot them in the head, and they grab them by the machine, the assembly line. They pick them by the back of the feet and pull them up and put them in boiling water, where some of these cattle don't die. And when they lower them down, they're still alive. They're kicking and screaming, kicking and doing everything else, why they're being lowered into this boiling water. So to me, it's the veganism. It's immoral to be eating animals, but there's got to be a way of stopping humans and just stopping the environment. And to me, we can't just apply the antinatalism to prevent more children. But we need to protect all these animals and species of non-human, non-sentient that can't defend themselves because they don't know, what's happening. Even the little lemmings that go off the cliff, you said the lemmings. Well, the scientists just found out that the reason why they do that is that when one lemming starts moving, the other one is instinctively, through evolution, looks at the tail. If the tail of an object in front, you can have a board there with just a tail, you move that, and that lemming will look at that tail without moving. They just follow the tail in front of them. They don't look at the animal or the big picture. And so then they die. So it's just, why every 10 minutes in this country, somebody commits suicide. So while we've been talking, maybe 4 or 5 people have already committed suicide, and they're dead. Also, every 10 minutes in the United States, 24 hours a day, a person is killed in a car accident. So while we were sitting here, there's somebody lying out there with their car upside down, lying out there on the ground with their head decapitated or something. And then they said that 350,000 deer are hit by cars every year in the United States. Even one deer hit by a car.
Well, I wanted to ask you, following up with that, I mean, are you a vegan? And also, what do you think about people having the access to the right to die? Like, if people are brought here without, consent into this slaughterhouse, essentially, should people have the right to exit at the time of their choosing?
Oh, absolutely. And I think they have that up in the state of Washington and a couple other states. They have that now, but they have to have the doctor's permission. They have to be in, knowing that they're going to die within the next few months and they're in a lot of pain. Then you go to Europe and have it done there. But if a person, I think if a person wanted to die, but it wouldn't be like broke up there with a girlfriend, so they're going to go kill themselves or something. It would be somewhere that would be under controlled condition. And then it would be something that's logical. The person just explains to a doctor that even though they're healthy, they don't really seem like they can make a contribution to prevent more pain and suffering, and they want to just exit out. And then, of course, because that's their voice. Right? I was here in Boone yesterday, and there's the women going. You had these women and men. Students at the university and different people in town were going by about the abortion thing. Don't control our body. Don't tell us what to do with our body. Well, it's their body, and these Supreme Courts, it's a handful of people are changing that, and people don't want that. They want to have even if it's wrong, even if they do something to their body that's wrong, or makes more sense. That at least they're in control. It's not somebody else, like a dictatorship, telling them what to do. And I got very concerned with this one this woman that got on the Supreme Court a year or two ago, whatever it was. And she's always smiling, like she's very happy, and she's very religious, and she has 7 children. I mean, I figured, well, it's just not going to be too many years, and she's going to help create a major problem in the United States, and it's just part of humans are just coming. And one thing that was interesting, I read a couple of days ago, was I was surprised, is that even the Ice Age ended about 10 or 12,000 years ago. That humans first became Homo sapiens. 200,000 years ago. They're classified as one of the 17 or 18 different the trees of the humanoids, and they all died off, and Neanderthals died off 40,000 years ago, but they were interbreeding before that. But 200,000 years ago, there was Homo sapiens. And they said, it was something that totally, astounded me. They said the intelligence of Homo sapiens, when they became Homo sapiens 200,000 years ago, were just as intelligent as we are today. They were thinking. There was Einsteins back there. There was Picassos. There was Rembrandts. Mozarts. They were scientists. Einstein. They were back there. I mean, they were not just a handful of them. They were just like us. If we met them on the street, even though they looked a little bit hairy or something, they could talk and communicate. They weren't. It didn't evolve that they got smarter and smarter. When they became Homo sapiens, bingo. And so the only difference they didn't have computers. They didn't have libraries. They didn't have
access to information.
That's it. And so I was surprised about that. So 200,000 years and has elapsed with intelligent people just like today, and we're still mildly civilized savages. Something is not
getting worse, though.
It's getting worse
all the time. Yeah, we're going backwards now.
Yeah, with Putin in that, and so it's best to not have children. There's nothing immoral about it, and it's just basic facts. It's like gravity. It's facts. And this woman I was talking to on the Amtrak, she's a professor in philosophy at Duke University. I don't want to mention her name, but she said, "Oh, all this stuff, right? It could, not non-procreation, and it rises to the level of immoral on the philosophical level." And I was thinking, no, it doesn't. That doesn't have to rise up to that. I was thinking, the philosophy and the immoral area of philosophy needs to rise up to that.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not. It's like everything has to be rising up to that. So it's just a natural thing. And the big question I had when I was looking at some of your questions is that how do you reach out to the rest of the world? And to me, it's difficult, because what I did is I decided to try to talk to a handful of people, relatively speaking, in the rest of my life, and is that convincing a few people here and there, and they go, "Oh, you're absolutely right, Amanda, you are right, Richard." Then it doesn't have any effect on 7.9 billion people. So you can write books in that, but here's the reason why I think. Well, I came to the conclusion. I think I know the answer. It's how humans grow up. Okay, they're born. They don't realize until they're maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years of age that they even exist, and then they have that period up until puberty of like maybe used to be 12 to 14 years, where they have a hormonal change. And so then they become little creatures almost. They're not like the little children when they're 3 years of age and they're playing and the mother takes them out, which they never remember any of it anyway. And the Christmas or their birthdays and all that, and special treats, because they're too young to even remember what they had on their birthday when they were 2 years of age. But anyways, so they're born. They're sort of like going through this learning phase or maturity. But then they go through the hormonal changes at puberty, and then they become different people. The hormones change the person. It's almost like being out in the African area, where they have to the brain evolutionary, that they have to learn how to go and survive. They have to at 12 or 14. And so if you look at almost all the major sports, well, what do they look like? Well, from 12 years of age in junior high school, they got them playing sports and competition. So what are they doing? Everything looks like something that the Africans would be using to kill animals. Yeah, they throw a baseball. What's that? That's a rock.
Spear.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually picking up a rock. Okay, and then you have like a basketball, where you shoot a basketball, and that's like throwing a spear. You're throwing it far to hit something. And then football, same way. You're hitting something to beat it down in order to kill it. And so in tennis, it's like taking a rock and hitting it with your hands. If you look at tennis rackets, they're like your hand, like a big hand hitting hitting, grabbing, and throwing a ball. So anyways, but here's something that they recently found is that a couple of years ago, is that the human brain does not mature until the age of 30. They used to think it was 22, and then they thought it was 25. But now the neuroscientists announced about a year and a half ago, is that the human brain doesn't mature until 30 years of age. Now, here's the problem with the pushing atheism or anti-natalism, and that between the ages of, our value system is how we interpret and add meaning to things. Okay? So if you say, what is your value system? If you tell me your whole value system, then I know who you are, because that's how you live and that's what your standards are. Now, between the ages of 15 and 16, and up to age 27, 28, a person's value system changes between 5 and 8 times on how they perceive the world, and they interpret the world and they respond to the world. It changes 5 to 8 times between age of 15, 16, and 17 and 18. Now, as those value systems change, like just say in the summertime, you're young, you're 12 years of age or something, you go off to camp for the summertime for 2 weeks or a month or something, or anything, any vacation just away from where you live. Well, you come back and then you look around and you say, in the fall, all my friends have changed. I don't know. They all seem to change, and I don't know why. I mean, all those friends and your children around, they didn't all get together and say, "Hey, Amanda's leaving for the summer. We're going to all change and pretend like we're different people." No, it's that Amanda left for the summer, even a couple of weeks, and was changed by her environment with her not even knowing it. So when she came back, she was looking through all of her friends and all of her sisters, the whole situation, the whole environment, through different glasses, through sunglasses. So everything looks different. Now this is a change in value system that a person didn't even know. So between the ages of 15 and 16 and 27, 28, a person's value system changes between 5 to 8 times. So now it's sort of like cement. It's sort of gradually each time it becomes a little bit harder and harder and harder, because you make cement, you can move it around and that, but then as time goes on, it gets crystallized and it gets harder. So by the time a person is 27 or 28, their philosophical outlook and value system is 90% of what it is at the age of 55.
Well, and part of that, again, though, it goes back to access to information, because having an atheistic, antinatalistic, animal rights perspective, whatever, all of these things that it connects to, it's not a pair of sunglasses people get a chance to try on at any point. Like it's not out there in the world. Obviously, antinatalism is an ancient idea in one form or another. It's been there, but it's still so obscure, it's yeah. Go ahead,
and you're absolutely correct. You're right on the nose. But see, but we have to. I mean, we have to look at something. It has to look at just the brain maturing, up until the age of 30. Well, that's the time to get these people acclimated. But see, but each year that goes by between 15 and 16 to 27, 28 years of age, each year it becomes more difficult, because the value system is starting to solidify and to crystallize. And then at 27, 28, their value system is 90% of what's going to be at the age of 55. They're not going to change. So talking to those people is a waste of time, because they're locked in. Their cement has crystallized, and they can't change because they're locked in. And the research shows that at 27 or 28, their value system is 90% of what's going to be at the age of 55. They don't change. They can't change. And so you have to get them between 15, 16 and 27, 28. And also the brain, again, doesn't mature until the age of 30. So these people that are graduating from high school, wanting to get married at 20 and 25 and 22 and 18, well, their value system when they meet are something that sort of is attractive. But then a year later, a month later, one of those value systems changes a little bit just by their environment without even knowing it. Then another one changes, and this one changes, and it goes back and forth, the husband and wife. And then one day they wake up and they look at each other and say, I don't even know who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the person, well, I'm the same person. Well, that person has changed, but both of them has changed their value system on what they appreciate without them even knowing it. So each of them are good, but they should never get married until they're 27 or 28, because then they know the person that they're marrying is going to be 90% their value system and outlook on life and that at the age of 55. So they're not going to change. So anybody gets married before that time is just flipping a coin, and that's when they have these children.
No, it's an incredibly uphill, near Sisyphusian, job that we have before us, of exposing people to these ideas and getting them to understand and access to these ideas. The good news is that it is growing. I mean, it is appealing to more and more young people. When I started on YouTube with all of these ideas, was when I first learned about antinatalism, there was really only just like a pile of us. Now it's grown tremendously. It's still got a long way to go, but obviously everything you're saying, I mean, how you make the argument is of the utmost importance. I mean, that is the project number one. And so much of that starts with having a word attached to it. Like, we finally have a word for it, but what we don't have necessarily is a definition to that. So, we spoke a little bit about this already, but, outside of Wikipedia, the word antinatalism is still not included in or defined by any dictionary in the world in any language. And as you brought up, I have twice now campaigned to have that word added to the Oxford English Dictionary to no avail. And thank you for your ideas on maybe ways we could accomplish that. But in addition to this, even the Wikipedia definition keeps changing. So in your opinion, how do you feel that antinatalism should be defined?
Well, see, you're almost the creator of it, because even though the word's been around for, even though the word's been around.
Oh, no, I'm not. No, I'm not.
No, I'm saying it is the definition. See, the definition is changing because like the meaning of the, no purpose, no meaning. The only humans can ascribe a meaning to something. Okay. Now, whoever started this in the 1950s or something, antinatalism, they subscribed at that time with limited knowledge about the Big Bang and the universe and all this stuff that's been discovered, in the last 50 years. They described that to their value system on a definition for antinatalism. That doesn't mean it's supposed to be here forever. Whoever described atheism 300 years ago or 200 years ago, whatever, they interpreted the meaning on whatever they were seeing and perceived. But today, that would be a different ball game. So we can't just tie ourselves into something 200 years ago or 70 years ago. That person did the best they could. So you can say the updated modern definition of antinatalism is boom, whatever you make it, because it's your meaning. You're adding it to it. Now, somebody wants now Wikipedia. Anybody says at the bottom, people can add and subtract from the definition. So you know more about antinatalism than anybody on the planet, probably. I mean, I'm almost sure of that. And so close to it. And so you can ascribe the modern definition. So I would go with the modern definition of antinatalism, and you make it up because you know more than the person who created the term, because that person was 70 years ago and probably just made it up in his dream or something. But whoever it was, just wanted to throw out the idea, get people to think, and here's his definition. But today, you can subscribe, you can say, ascribe your meaning and call it the modern definition. And then in there you say, in 1950s, this John Doe, he created this term, and his impression and definition is this. And now over the last science and astrophysics and biology and chemistry and all the discoveries, Nobel Prize, everything is now leading to the modern updated definition as a boom. And you know enough that nobody's going to, I mean, you know more than I think than anybody in the world on this, the definition and experiencing it. You're writing articles on it. You're having, broadcasts and that. So who is anyone going to go to? They're going to go to Amanda. And so you create the new modern definition and just throw it out there. And then maybe the Oxford Dictionary people will say, hey, yeah, we can relate to this because it's the modern. It's not something, antique. It's a modern definition of antinatalism. I could do it. I could write a new modern definition and put in all the reasons for that because of all the scientific discoveries in that and submit it to them. And they may say, hey, yeah, this is good. But I prefer it came from you because you're active in this thing. And a person told me years ago, Amanda, 30 years ago, they said, always give a person an opportunity to say no. So you submit the modern new definition and you make it, you put in all the information that deals with all the other people that believe the same thing, and some of David's work in that. And then you contact him and say, we need an updated definition. We can't use something antiquated about 70 years ago when people couldn't even find their way to the bathroom. And today we have internet, we have Skype, we have all kinds of things, and we need a modern, new, updated definition. This is what I think, David. What do you think? He'll add his stuff to it, and you pull these people together. And then when you sent this to Oxford, you've got about 20 or 30 scientists and people in philosophy and that are backing up this new definition. You throw it around to people, and then it'll get in because they'll see, all these people using it, and there's books out about it, and there's articles about it, and there's not demonstration, but there's little workshops and things like that. So they want to have the new modern definition, not something that's antiquated that nobody's going to pay attention to. But you get all these people down at the bottom to sign off on it, and you write it, you send it to them and say, what do you think? And we need a modern new definition of anti-natalism. And they'll say, well, I think you ought to add this. Well, this is it. And then they'll sign it, and then you submit it, and then they can't resist it. You got the credibility and credentials behind it. But you write it out as what you think, and then bounce it off these people, and then the final thing will be everybody will support it. And then they sign off on it. They have the names at the bottom. You send that to Oxford, bingo.
Well. First of all, I don't.
I'm just throwing out the idea.
No, I love the idea. I wish it could work that way. I do.
It will. It will. I know how these things work. See, I got a degree in education administration, but I know how these things work and how people work. These people at Oxford don't care. What they want is they want to be able to be on top of the latest words in the English language. And they want to have the modern definition, so someone doesn't come along and embarrass them by saying, well, this is 70 years old. Hasn't anything changed? Yes, Amanda came along with David and about 30 other people, and they have the modern definition. They say, and then the Oxford people will say, it doesn't cost them anything. They say, yeah, we want, when people go to our dictionary, we want to be able to be on top of this. Here it is, and it even makes reference to the Wikipedia. And so then you're making a significant change, and you've got the background of about 30 or 40 or 20 or 30 top international people that scientists, credible, like David, that's written books and that, and they say, okay, we can't go wrong with this because we got these people. We can't get any better.
Well,
it's just an idea, but I know how people think, and these people at Oxford, they're going to, they can't say no. I mean, it's a major new term. I mean, they want to be on top of it. But anyways, but try it. All they can say is, remember, always give a person an opportunity to say no, and they can. But 1 out of every 20 times I found, in the people normally that use these terms. no matter how outrageous it is, 1 out of 20 times they'll say yeah, because no matter how outrageous, you can come up to somebody and say, will you give me $1 million? But 20 people may say, 19 may say no. The other person might have just inherited the lottery and say, sure, here's $1 million. No matter how outrageous it is, always give a person an opportunity to say no.
Yeah.
If they say no, then the ball is in their court at Oxford.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of contacting all those people and seeing what they think. I mean, I just want to clarify. I do not think that I know more about the subject than anybody else. I don't think that at all. But I will say that one of my reasons for doing this show, and talking to so many people as I have, is because I think defining this thing is so important. And the issue right now is that there's so much disagreement about what this thing is. Is it only for human beings, or is it only for the animals? Is this about extinction, or is it about just having less children? Is it?
And here's how you could do this. Okay, you get the top 20 people that knows about this topic. Okay, like David and these other people. I don't know who they are. Send a letter from you, an email, whatever. Say, we are going to present a new definition, updated modern definition of antinatalism to Oxford and Wikipedia, and I would like for you, different people, to send me your definition of antinatalism. Totally. If it's animals, the sentient, and then I'm going to collect all of them, and then I'm going to pull out all the common elements, and then present it, and then get back with you with what we put together to see if you approve it. If you do approve it, then we'd like for you to sign off on it, so we got the credibility when we send it to Oxford. So therefore, you don't have to create one. You would have them submit, maybe 20 of the top people, and then you'll go through, and then you'll piece it together. Then you'll send them that, plus all of the other people's definitions, so they can see everybody and what you came up with. And they say, most of them will say, yeah, that looks okay. And they'll check off on it because you included everything. You got everybody's ideas in. Here they are. And they'll sign off on it and say, yeah, we'll support that, and send it on to Oxford and Wikipedia and see what happens. And so therefore, you're not having to see. I would create one and then send them to see if they have them approve it. But even a better way for you, if you want, is ask them to submit it to you. You look at all of them, pull it together, and then send it to them and say, this is what we're going to send off, but I want you to finally check it off and make sure it's including everything you have, even though it's 5 pages long, and for you to sign off on it so we can send it on and with your signatures. And then they'll say, fantastic, they're making history.
Well, I mean, it's a great idea. I mean, I'll give it a try for sure. I mean, I will say this. I did get somebody to respond to me from Webster's at one point, and they said that the reason why they can't put it in now is because there's not enough published work on the subject, which is kind of crazy. I mean, there's a lot of published work on the subject, but there's also so many different types of material that they don't accept. So, like, if it's mentioned in an online, what is it called? Sorry, articles, they don't accept any of that.
Well, but you have David's book, you have my books, and
but it's not enough. It's in their mind. It should be, but yeah.
But just keep throwing it back at them, and you might find that they wake up one day and give them a chance to say no, and then they'll say no, and then they'll say no, and then they'll say, well, we've this is a new this is a concept that people are going to talk about, and so why not put something in there at least to get the people something they can refer to, because you say Webster and the Wikipedia and Oxford Dictionary are references people go to get started on research. So you say, well, you don't want to be Webster or Oxford and Wikipedia, and there's a major movement going on around the world, and you don't even know the name of it, and so
you're 100% right. You're 100%. Yeah. We just need to be more tenacious about it, and you're right. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you contact 20 of the top people and have them put down their books and their articles and everything, along with what their definition is, then you've got all these 30 or 40 or 50 articles and books and everything, plus their definition. You piece it together and throw it out and say, okay, I pieced all these together, 20 of them, and some of it overlap, some of it's new, but what do you think? And before we send it off to Oxford, they'll look at it. It only takes them a couple of minutes to skim it and say yes, no, add this, change that, and then then they say, once you've done this, sign off on it at the bottom that you support this definition, and then send it to Oxford, send it to everybody, and then you get you send it to your legislators and say, you want them to submit money, a bill to raise money to push this idea or something, and all they can say is no. But I've been turned down numerous times, but every once in a while someone will say yes, and when I least expect it, and from somebody that's new. But anyways, but I think going back, you can't communicate with people that before puberty. During puberty, they're in another world, and then when they're about 17, about 15 or 16, their value systems are going to start changing until the time of 27 and 28. After 27 and 28, the value systems are locked in, and they'll be 90% of what they are when there's 55, so you can't tell the difference. So between 15, 16, and 17 and 18, they're going to be the value systems will change, and it'd be good to be part of that change where they see your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is great. This is great, Richard. All great thoughts. I'm gonna definitely give the dictionary thing another try, because it's so important. I mean, it's such a simple thing, but having a concrete definition to words, I think is really important to things better understood.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. If you get it together and you get the final modern, call it not the new, but the updated modern version, the definition. That's what I would call it. And then is there people from Oxford dictionary? Are they've got to have some offices in the United States, probably New York City or someplace.
I believe they do.
Okay, I'll track them down, and then we'll find somebody like a legislator or somebody, a governor or some top person that when he calls them and hands that definition, that they'll listen.
All right. It's a deal. It's a project. Let's
okay.
do it for sure.
Okay. We would get George Carlin, but he's passed away.
No, yeah. There's some people I'd love to have their input on, but it's a little too late for that. All right. Well, thank you, Richard. That's great. So let me just move on to our next question. I got one more question, and then we can speak more specifically about your books. But yeah, so I'm interested in knowing your thoughts on this. So in addition to being a philosophical position, antinatalism over the last 10 years or so has also become a developing social movement as well. And since 2019, antinatalist activism began to develop, and we're now seeing the emergence of things more akin to traditional activism like street outreach, meetups, and even the formation of like proto-NGOs. There's Child Free India, there's Stop Having Kids, which you're familiar with. There's my collective called Antinatalism International. There's the AAPJ, which is the Association of Anti-Procreationism in Japan. So are you familiar with some of these developments? And I know that you are. And what are your thoughts on them? And can you talk a little bit specifically about your involvement so far with Stop Having Kids?
Well, I mean, actually, I didn't know about these things because and it's good to know that it's starting, because I figured it had to start sometime before the humans overpopulate and destroy the earth. And my purpose was just to put something in writing. It's sort of a to just when I used to talk to people and try to convince them that try to convince them at least to share new research that's been done, and the philosophical issues, just not to have any more children brought into into existence to suffer and die. And but then I decided to write the books and just hand it to people and just say, here, read it if you're interested, because I don't have time and energy to keep talking to people that just walking down the street or somebody I know. And I sent some of my books to some of my friends, and they stopped speaking to me. And I thought, I send them a book, and then they don't return calls or whatever. I thought, well, uh, you know, I call them back and they don't return the calls. I've known them for like 20, 30 years and that. So I think, well, maybe I've hit a nerve or something, but they think I'm out wanting to kill children or something, who knows what, because they don't understand. And so, but that's it's good that these other movements are happening, and they've got to happen because they're going to be growing because of just overpopulation. And but no one's willing to stand up and say, no legislator is willing to stand up and say we need to not procreate because they don't get reelected, and then they get their homes stoned, and they get all kinds of pressure and that, and death threats and all kinds of things. And so the government's not going to do it. And then like in China, they said, well, we have 1.3 billion people, or 1.4 billion people, but we're losing our population because our population is going down. Well, they should jump up and down about that and be great about it. But they said they need another 300 million people, just so they can have people working in the factories and taking care of the elderly and paying taxes or whatever they do over there. And the top government people are like, are not going to help. So how are you going to do it? Well, people die in nursing homes and assisted living and hospitals every day, and there's nobody to speak for them, and so they can't do anything, even though they're the ones that are suffering. And people with cancer, the children. Just saw an article this morning. Some followers saying how his child died of cancer. And she was only like 3 years old or something, and so it's almost like humans are not learning. And if they were like 200,000 years, since humans were just as bright as they are today, and we look at today, and Steven Pinker says, well, over the last 10,000 years, we become a little bit more civilized. I mean, there's less, they say, but it's so slight, and he's calling. Then you look at Ukraine, and that's the same thing as they did, in the caves, and killing each other and things like that. So there's no way to say that they're improving. He's just saying there's less people being killed in wars, so we're more peaceful. Well, people got cell phones, they got ear things, and they listen to music, and they watch TV, they go to movies, and so they don't have time to go out and kill people. But if all those were taken away, then they would end up being out there on the front lines, killing and murdering people. And so it's good that these movements are happening, and but my purpose was just to have something out there that people, like yourself and other people, and then stop having kids. I just happened to run across them out of the blue. I couldn't believe it. I was just going to, and just popped up out of the blue in the corner. I said, "Stop having kids." As what's that? A joke? Is that a new song or something that from hip hop or something? And I looked at it and I said, "Well, maybe these people are real." I thought, "Wow, finally, I see something that's positive." And so I called them up and talked to them, and I said, "Well, I've got all these books here, like 8 different titles." I said, "Here's 200. I'll send them to you in the mail." So it said you can give them out, and when you have conferences, you have people that might want to read it and talk about them. But I'm not interested in making money off of it. It's you sell a book and you get like $6. I mean, I can't retire off $6 or $12. So, but I'm already retired. But so this is each person. You just have to keep plugging away and hoping, even if you save one child from being born, that's one child.
Absolutely.
That's what I feel about it. It's but I don't want to spend the rest of my life, a few years I have left, trying to convince other people where they end up not making any change. I like to make decisions, do things that make changes, across the board. But but then I just spent my life gone by trying to save somebody else. And then if those people save somebody else and they die, then nobody ends up enjoying themselves. They're all trying to change the system. But the more information, and if you have national conferences or state conferences, those things always seem to work, because I used to organize those things and people will show up. And but you have to have enough, charge them $30 to come to talk on the topic, and get some reporters to show up, and they'll always write an article because it's controversial. So
that's definitely something that needs to start happening next. Is more more antinatalism in more public spaces, conferences, that kind of thing. There's a little bit of that happening now, but not enough certainly. But Stop Having Kids is a huge step forward in that direction. Do you think you might ever go out there and to Portland and march with them or something like that, or start your own division where you are? Yeah.
Well, I have two brothers that live in the state of Washington. So when I go out to visit them, I'm going to be looking up, and I'll probably get a big flag and a big poster and walk around with them, and
nice.
Just to give them my support. But I told them that they have my support if I can help in any way. But I sent all these books to them, and so I figured that they could hand them out, or raise some extra money by selling them, or just handing them out, because these people, like 200 books, are handed out to 200 different people, and those people are going to go back, and if they read it, they wouldn't take it unless they were going to read it, and then they get some ideas, and then they pass the books on to somebody else, and then or they have other people, their friends, ordering the books, and then somewhere it might hit a nerve where some legislator or some mayor or somebody might say, yeah, this is what I've been believing, and here's one of these books, and my whole family has a genetic defect, and here it says we're born, we suffer, we die, and or the whole system. And what I sort of like is the whole system is based on, and this is how I explain it to people, the whole system is based on suffering. I said, if you were Amanda and someone came to you, years ago when you were very young, and said, wow, I'm going to give you $1 billion, and I want you to create a system that is based on suffering from the bottom all the way to the top. And I want to be crucial and evil and just the most terrible thing you could ever do, is to make the most suffering possible. And then you would turn to me and say, oh, that's already been done. God did it.
Here we are. Yeah, exactly.
And I'll say, damn, I thought I had a new idea. But it's right here, and we're living it. So nobody could create a system more corrupt, evil, suffering in the most vicious ways than what we're experiencing. So people are coming around to that, and I think the world has changed since but Putin is bombing all these, randomly. I mean, not randomly, just bombing hospitals and children's homes, and children dying, and arms being blown off, and all that, and mass killings and raping of the wives in front of their children, their husband, then killing them, and then raping their children. I mean, the people are seeing this, and they're thinking, how can we prevent this? And you say we can't now, but you can prevent the next generation from being born, so they don't have to go through this.
Exactly. So Richard, we can start talking about your books now. I'm really excited to get into all of that with you. The books that you worked on with Philip Stahl.
Phil Stahl, I came in one day. He wrote about 14 books, and he's a friend of mine. I met at the New Orleans at the Pan American Petroleum, and so we became friends. He happened to have the same last name as I did, and so I never met anybody with the last name Stahl. So I became friends with him to find out who he was and that. And so he was where he got his master's degree in astrophysics. Started working on his Ph.D. at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, and then then he had to drop out, but he wrote books on astrophysics and mathematics and that. So one day I said, I started talking to people about, atheism and that. So everybody seemed to be confused. And so I called Phil up. I said, why don't you write a handbook on atheism, so if people can just buy it, or I can just give it to them, and then they can, a handbook on what it's about. And he said, okay. So he did it. And I said I would edit it for him. And he said that'd be fine. But he's such a brilliant person that it didn't take too much editing. And a few years later, after I handed some of these out to people and recommended them, they seemed to be confused because it was too much of an advance. So I called Phil up again and said, he's out in Colorado Springs, and with his wife, and I said, how about a beginner's book? So at least the people can start with, A, B, C, and work their way up, and then the next book would be a handbook that they can then carry around with them. And so he said, okay. So I did that book, and so that's where those came from.
But yeah, no, I saw those books on Amazon. I'd really love to read them at some point.
I did actually send one of the books to you, the handbook one, to you, so you can get that on Monday.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Richard. That's amazing. I can't wait to get those. That's great.
Yeah, Phil Stahl, he's an atheist, of course, and master's in astrophysics, and he has a blog that you might want to recommend to your readers or your listeners. Yeah. It's called a brain space. And a brain is not the human brain. It's spelled BRANE and then space, SPACE. He's got probably 1,000 blogs on there about every subject, atheism, all kinds. And all these people contact him, and they're a little bit, some of them a little bit off. And he tries to convince them that there's no God, no procreation, all of that, and they come up with these, bizarre things. But the whole blog is there, on these things. But he's probably got a couple thousand, and he's got prostate cancer right now. But he has these blogs are, he does it very logically, very straightforward. He's been doing it for years, and especially on atheism. But your people might want to look at those, because he does an excellent job of covering those topics and the logic that people are using to counteract that. And but he's just really a brilliant person and very good. Yeah. And so but he didn't have any children either, because he thought it was immoral. And so he decided he did something very smart when he was young. It's sort of very very unique. He said he didn't want to have children, and so he went in that, and he found this woman when he was in the Peace Corps about 40 some years ago, and that didn't want to have children either. And so, because most people say, if you don't want to have children, nobody's going to want to marry you. But there are women out there that don't want to have children, and there's men that don't want to have children. You can always find one. They're usually a little bit smarter than the average person. But he said, okay, this is what we'll do. We'll get married and no children, and I'll work for the first 20 years of our marriage, day and night. And then at that time, I'm going to retire, and you're going to work for the next 20 years. Making the money and supporting us. And this woman, who's very bright, very brilliant, she said, she's 10 years older than him. She said, okay. So she could go back to college. She could do all kinds of things. He supported it. And then after 20 years, he stopped. He said, then I want to write books. And so he stopped. She started working. She made maybe $150,000 a year. And so he wrote all these books, 14 books on different topics, and for the next 20 years. And I said, never heard of anybody that, but neither one wanted to have children. They didn't want to bring their children into this world, and they had a unique way of both being very productive, because instead of both of them working for 30 or 40 years, one then the other, and they're extremely happy people.
Yeah, that's very smart. Well, he sounds awesome. I'll definitely link to all of his stuff below, and I'm really looking forward to reading those books for sure. Richard, I'd love to speak with you in detail about all your books. You are, of course, quite a prolific author. I don't believe we'll have time to speak about all your books today. However, our audience can find links to all of them in the description below. They're available on Amazon and a number of different places. But moving on to sort of your more, your more focused antinatalist work, there's really quite a few, which I was really excited to find out. All of the books that begin with the title "The End of the Tragic Non-Event" are the same book, right? I mean, there are some of them that are a little bit different, but so like the one that I have is this one, which is "The End of a Tragic Non-Event. Not even Jesus Christ asked to be born." 112 billion sentient humans victimized. The solution for rectification, 2017. Yes. So, just quickly going over, so there's, I think, 5 different versions of this one. There's also the moral imperative for the systematic intentional termination of evolution. I love that title. And then there's also the Seventh Extinction, which we talked a little bit about. And then also the quintessential evolutionary system based on suffering.
All those books are the same content.
All those books are the same, right.
And the reason why I have the end of a tragic non-event is that once all the humans become extinct on this planet, and say an alien came down from another place and looked down there, and in about, if all the humans died today and all the plants in that, in 10,000 years, 100,000 years, 1,000,000 years, there would be no trace of humans even being here. And so then if we look back and said, the alien said, I think there's some humans back there for a couple 100,000 years that actually were, sentient. Then they decided to end it all. And but the whole existence of all life and all these people, plus all life, animals and everything, was basically a very tragic non-event, because all this event happened, and when they ended up no longer existing, it was a non-event that didn't continue on to affect anything else. So I always put that at the end of a tragic non-event, which means all this stuff that's going on is just basically a non-event because it doesn't go on. And also, if you take a piece of paper, I'll give you an idea. It goes back to George Carlin again. But if you take a piece of paper and take, a pen or a pencil, take a blank piece of paper and just make a big circle. Okay. Now, that represents the Earth. Okay. That line of the width of that ink is all humans. And that ink, that just the ink, this is the Earth, that circle, and that ink line is wider than the Earth and going all the way out to space with all the atmosphere. So most people think that here we are on Earth and it makes up the whole Earth and everything, but just making a circle, that line, the width of that little ink is wider than the Earth going all the way, planet Earth where we're standing, all the way out to the end of the atmosphere. So you see how small humans are. And so, as George Carlin would say, he says so nicely. He said everybody's worried about saving the Earth, saving the planet, saving the squid, saving the whale, saving all this stuff. He said the Earth is just fine. The Earth is not going anywhere. We don't need to save the Earth because the Earth is going to be here. It's been here for 4.6 billion years. It's going to be here for another 3 billion years. The Earth is just doing fine. We're not doing fine. The Earth is not going anywhere, but we are. We are not going to be here. So to me, all this stuff is a tragic non-event because, is temporary, but there's not going to be any trace of us after another, 100,000 to a million years. Aliens will come here, and I don't believe in it. You mentioned one of the questions about aliens, and answer is zero. There is no alien. There's other life out there probably in the bacterial, type of form
Right.
or protozoas. But as far as because there's so many things that happen on this Earth that had to be at the right time. The Goldilocks, where not too hot, not too cold, just right. And then a lot of religious people think of it's the universe and the Earth is perfectly tuned for life, and it is. But that just supports the multiverse where there's trillions of other universes out there, and we just happen to live in the one that had the right physical laws and materials to eventually have life. And even on Earth, there's so many things that happened. In 66 million years ago, if that big asteroid wouldn't have hit, we wouldn't be here. Because the asteroid killed 90% of the life on Earth, and then all the dinosaurs and these little tiny lemmings who were hiding out in the trees eventually evolved into humans. But if that asteroid wouldn't have landed, we wouldn't have been here. So that wouldn't have happened on any other place. So in essence, it supports the multiverse, billions of other universes out there. We just happen to be in that fine-tuned one that happened to be in the right one. So aliens are not going to be here. And
no, I agree. I don't believe in aliens. No, yeah. for sure. I mean, so you did this piece of writing originally in 2016, but then the different iterations of it with different titles came out mainly in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a really fantastic breakdown, regarding the meaningless of our existence, as well as all the reasons why we should not create, new life. And it's just want to say it's very well written. It's very engaging. I enjoyed it tremendously. Written in a manner that I think anybody can understand, and I think you should be, applauded for that fact alone. I mean, it's a lot of, complicated information made very, very simple for that anybody can engage with, and that's a huge piece of the puzzle. That's one of the most important things you can do with this message, just make it accessible.
Yeah, I wrote the book in 2 weeks.
Wow, that was my next question: is how long did it take to write? 2 weeks. That's amazing. Amazing.
I just one day I decided to sit down and start writing it. And I said I'm tired of. I came back from trying to talk to somebody else into the big picture and that. And I came back and said enough. I'm not going to be telling these people they're worn out and they don't even make a change in their lives. So I sat down. It took 20 hours, 18 to 20 hours a day for 2 weeks. I I isolated myself, and then I came up for air, and then but a week later I looked over it and tried to correct any errors or whatever, and then I just set it off and it was done. So even though it took years and years, I wasn't planning on doing a book, but when I finally got tired of trying to explain to people, and then I realized how useless that was, because changing 1 or 2 or 20 people's minds or 100 people out of almost 8 billion people, I figured I'd just write a book and then put it on Amazon and then just get lots of copies for myself and just hand it to people and say, here it is. If you want to read it, fine. If you don't, then that's fine. Give it to somebody else or don't take it. And that way it saved me a lot of stress of trying to explain to people. And then. Yeah. But again, a lot of people I sent it to never talked to me again. So that's
unfortunate. Yeah, I've had similar experiences.
but also some people I didn't want to bother me anymore and keep calling me about trivial stuff in their lives. I sent copies to them so they wouldn't call me again.
Nice. Yeah, it can be a good tool for jettisoning certain people from your life as well. So yeah, that's smart. So there's 2 parts of the book I want to touch on in particular. Part 3, called "In Our Hearts We Have Always Known What Needs to Happen," Section 17, "The Ultimate Imperative Moral Dictum of Reality," closing the story on meaning and mindless evolution. Entropy is the slow and part, I think it's 5. The means of our greatest accomplishments as a species. It is our primary destiny, Section 20, implementation, saying goodbye. in the most morally painless manner for humans, better by us than nature. So I think this is where, I think things really come together, in this work, and and where things get really spicy, I have to say. And so much of your thinking on these matters is very similar to my own, I think, and it's also very similar to what is sometimes called ethilism, which you and I have talked a little bit about, before. And so, I mean, I'm trying to think of how best to start this. What is, as you call it, the systematic intentional termination of evolution? What does the systematic intentional termination of evolution process, look like? How can such a thing be carried out?
So with the universe having no purpose and basically, multiple meanings depending on the person, which is not very, substantial, then by coming to the conclusion that there is no purpose and basically, unsubstantiated real meanings of any meaningful substance, then we need to sort of then, as a seventh extinction, to go ahead and come together and systematically work out on how to terminate the existence of humans and all living organisms, so there's no more suffering whatsoever, and that is done by adding no more pain that a person would automatically experience anywhere in their lives without any interference, and like cancers and strokes and all kinds of things and car accidents and everything. Everybody just dies as they would normally, but systematically we stop having children, no more, and then with the population, no more children. Then what happens is that we actually have more resources. Life becomes better because people are going to die off. Nobody gets harmed. People start dying off naturally the way they would ordinarily die, by attrition. So therefore, as the population continues to decrease, there's more resources. So people have a better quality of life, better medical medical services, better homes, better whatever. And so as it keeps going down and down, there's more resources. So you're actually being more moral and human and prevent less suffering because there's more resources to get down to something. And then as it gets really down to almost zero, then humans can't just leave. It's immoral to leave, like running out of town and leaving all the problems behind. We have to not have the killing all these pigs and cows and chickens and everything, plus all the little insects, and the whole system is based on suffering, where the lowest level is eaten by the one right above it. Then that's eaten by the one above that, and so the whole system is based on suffering from the ground level. Everything's being eaten until the upper one, there's only a few left. Maybe the dinosaurs are gone, maybe the whales or something, but somehow they end up being attacked by things and eat sharks and that and eaten up. But everything is so therefore. So when it gets down to maybe the last person, then before this time, the systematic part is the governments get together when they make this final decision to take nuclear weapons, say, or something, and to exactly the only way they could really do this is to get everything, is to put all the nuclear weapons and even add more to it, and to put it on one part of the earth, and then the last person that dies, then a button will be pushed. Maybe if it doesn't push it every day, that means the person has died, and then it'll trigger that these nuclear weapons will explode and push the Earth off course. And within 5 seconds after the Earth is pushed off course, everything dies. And therefore, we've done our last systematic moral imperative, because once humans realize, which they already have, the top scientists, 98% of scientists are atheists, have realized that the system it needs to be corrected, rectified. So this rectifies the overpopulation, global warming, climate change, and they rectify this overpopulation. And interestingly, back in 1966, there was a Yale University economist, and he simply asked the question, what is the optimum population for the United States? Nobody's even asked that question, even today. Yeah, you got 335 million people, but the question should be asked, if you're, if you're a person, you go to the doctor and say, doctor, what is my optimum weight? I'm 6 foot, and a male or whatever. What's my optimal population? Weight. What's my optimum weight that I should maintain to live the longest and being the healthiest? And he'll say, well, 160 pounds. Say, oh, okay, so now I know what the optimum is, and I can choose to, meet that or not. But but nobody even asked what is the optimum population for the United States. Now, this economist, he did a research study, and he came up with a number, and it was where everybody would have, adequate health care, adequate homes, they had a car, in just, not the minimum, but just comfortable life, not mansions and yachts, but just he came up with 50 million. Now that's the optimum population. Now he said at 50 million, national and natural gas will run out in about 75 years. 70% of fertilizers are made out of natural gas, and then the petroleum will run out in about 70 years or something like that. Coal will run out in 500 years. At that time, mass starvation, everybody dies. That's it, 500 years. Okay, so we're at 330. So that's we're overweight by 6.5 times. So if you're 160 pounds and you're male and 6 foot tall, 170 pounds, and now you weigh 6.5 times that amount, what are you going to have? You're like 900 pounds. Well, you're going to have heart problems, you're going to have diabetes, you're going to have strokes, you're going to have cancers, you're going to have all kinds of problems. Now you know what's happening in the United States, because the population is, and so not only will the cold run out in 500 years, it's going to run out in 100 years or 80 years, and all the stuff's going to have with no fertilizer. People are going to starve in that. So the whole issue is systematically saying we need to get the population in the United States down to 50 million, and then continue on down. And you were doing it in the systematic termination of evolution, where everything becomes extinct, and it's systematically controlled, systematically done. Everybody sort of agrees to it, even though a lot of people won't. But people would have to agree to it if the facts are laid out that people are dying in the streets, starving, and there's no medical stuff in that. And so the politicians know this, and the government knows it, but they want to keep it from the people, because they don't want the people to get scared to know what is happening, and until it's too late. So why not systematically take care of this in a humanly?
Yeah. Our greatest possible responsibility is making sure that we exit as painlessly as possible as one sentience, and not just human beings, but all sentient creatures. When antinatalists start talking about ending all life on the planet, particularly when it comes to discussions about the end game, nuclear weapons, and ideas about, this is where there's a huge divide in antinatalism amongst antinatalists, when all this stuff gets brought up. And I don't blame, contrary to popular belief, I don't blame people for being nervous and concerned about it. But I also believe, and I think you would agree, that if we ourselves go extinct as a species, it really is our responsibility to decide what should happen to the rest of sentient life. It's just that simple. And there are forms of antinatalism, like Vehement, the voluntary human extinction movement, that has exactly the opposite opinion, that we should go extinct, but the animals should inherit the earth. And I see that as like our greatest possible failure, if that were to occur. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, sure, because a number of these people, they think or they're going to escape. It's like escaping from the Alamo. We're going to sneak out at night and leave the rest of the people to die while they're looking the other direction, killing off trying to defend themselves against the Mexican. But you can't just leave the Alamo and in the middle of the night and not tell anybody and sneak away because that everybody's doomed. You need to sort of make sure that you can get reinforcements and eliminate, save everybody, but everybody's going to die anyway. So it's a matter of just it's a sneaky way to say, we want to end human life, sentient, and then leave all these animals and that to fend for themselves. And but if no animals were ever injured, you say, well, it'd be a nice peaceful earth and everybody, all the animals would be happy and they're going to live forever and all that. But they're all going to, because of the whole system is based on suffering, everything is going to die a terrible death. And
exactly.
And it was interesting that I met this one medical doctor, one of the gifted programs. He had 2 gifted children. But he said, Dr. Stahl, he said, the other night I was out having dinner with my wife, and this person beside us sort of choking on some food, and he said it was sort of fortunate that I was there, because I went over and used the Heimlich maneuver and popped out this piece of steak or something the person was eating, and he said everybody came up to me and said, "Oh, thank God, doctor, you're here. You saved this person's life." And he said. A number of people, the restaurant said, "You've saved his life," and the person said, "You saved my life." And he said, I didn't want to say it to them, but he said, I didn't save the person's life. I just prolonged it.
Yeah, exactly.
Very significant. He said, I prolonged it. He said, if I saved his life, he would never die. All I did was prolong his life. And he said, I didn't want to say that to the people because, at the restaurant, but he said, but that stayed with me, even he said, and it stuck with me. Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was many years. That was back in the 1970s, but it added that little thing in my mind that, yes, we're just prolonging life, and we're prolonging the inevitable. And the longer we wait, the more tragic things can happen to us, and car accidents and cancers and all kinds of things. So I tell people, the moment that a person is conceived, from that time on, they are just waiting around to die. And I say, no, I'm going to go to the baseball field. I said, no, and I said, what happens is you're there waiting around to die, and you get hungry. And so you say, well, as I'm waiting around to die, I don't want to be hungry, so I'm going to go get some food. And then they say, now after I've had food, well, I'm sitting around here, but I guess it's raining, I better get an umbrella. So you see, everything is done just to fill up the space while you're waiting to die. And people think, well, that's a very morbid way of looking at it, but that's.
But I know what you're saying. We're consumed by reoccurring hungers. We're like, as my friend in Mendham, the creator of Apholism, says, we're need machines, and so we're propelled by our needs, and that keeps us in the game of life. But the future is looking grimmer and grimmer and grimmer. There's lots of people who hold out all this hope for paradise engineering and transhumanism, and we're going to become robots, and we're going to eliminate suffering from the system. And I just don't think we have time, and I just don't think we're on that path to do that. And so to neglect, in the face of that failure, all of those failures staring us, from the future, we have to plan the fail-safe end. You know, if you can't make it better, if you can't avoid the worst possible outcomes, then you at least have to prepare the euthanasia.
Yes, yeah, and we just can't keep waiting and waiting until something, because the resources are running out, and then it needs to go in the opposite direction. And they said in the news, the politicians use this. They said no matter the scientists said no matter how tragic something happens, no matter how incredibly tragic, a volcano or some type of anything that earthquakes and that. Said within the human brain, after about 5 or 6 months, totally forgets what happened. They said in China back in 1950s or someplace, there was an earthquake that killed 300 million people at one time in a day or two. 300,000 people died within just about 2 or 3 days with an earthquake. China never let the word out. And so it was about close to 50 years later, someone came out of China and when, and got it to the newspaper, and they said, how can they hide 300,000 people dying in one big village area in China and nobody know about it? Even though, but see, everybody was totally shocked. It was on the front page of all the newspapers. And 5 or 6 months later, people forgot that it even happened. And so the politicians, when they do something, they don't care how bizarre it is. They can have all kinds of affairs and all kinds of terrible things that they've done, and all they have to do is just let it go for like 5 or 6 months, and people will forget it even happened. And like Ted Kennedy or whatever, that Chappaquiddick, they just had to drag it out. I mean, let it sort of drift away until it sort of got eliminated from the human brain. So it never affects the person after that, because they don't even remember it happening unless somebody reminds them, and then say, oh yes, I remember that. But up until that time, it doesn't affect. So it's I don't think there's going to be any hope to. I mean, personally, that's going to change. I think you probably agree with it. There's just too many people, and too many self-interest, and people want to get reelected, and then they get in there like Joe Biden, 48 years, never passed a bill, never did anything except get reelected again. So some of these people just sort of and here's something else that's important. I think reason why the government can't do anything. The research sort of shows that the average person that graduates from the average person has a 100 IQ level. Okay, the average Jewish person has a 115. They're about one standard deviation ahead. The average person who graduates from college has a 118. Average master's degree has 128. Average Ph.D. has 134. Okay. Now there was this person I knew who was a genius. He had a Ph.D. in astronomy, and he had 172 IQ level, photographic memory. Probably the brightest person that's ever lived. He was a friend of mine for many years, but I said Spiro Agnew, who was vice president. He announced, and it was in all the front pages of all the newspapers, Spiro Agnew says that his IQ is 133. And I said, I called my friend up and said, if I had 133 IQ level, I would hide under a bed or go out and never speak to anybody again. I said, how could the vice president of the most powerful country in the world have 133 IQ level? You know what he told me? He said, that's relatively high for a vice president. Now, see, an average master's degree person has a 128. So how many master's degree people are there? He said it's very rare for a politician to have an IQ of 130. They're almost always like and George Bush had an IQ of 118. That's the IQ of a.
I thought it was a lot lower than that.
Yeah, university graduate. But can you imagine if a crisis came up at 3 o'clock in the morning? They came in to wake up George Bush Jr. and try to explain something, and he only had 118 IQ level, and he has to make a decision. And so politicians basically are not very bright, and once a person hits 130 IQ, this is like the highly gifted we're talking about, the gifted. But once a person reaches 130 IQ level, they have a qualitative difference in intelligence. It's not just a quantitative where they can learn more, accumulate more information, more facts, but there's a qualitative difference. Like you've got a Picasso compared to somebody, teaching art in the elementary school or something. There's a qualitative difference in their minds. So politicians can't handle that because they like to lie and tell things so that they can't think on a qualitative level. So they could just tell lies and misrepresent or do whatever they need to because they can't handle a qualitatively different intelligent person. Now, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton are sort of the exceptions. They've got like 136 and 138 IQ levels, so that's how they're able to manipulate all the other politicians, because they have sort of a con job going, because they can say, oh, we can't really get a good real job. I mean, what Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, they couldn't get a job as maybe an office manager or something. So they're using their intelligence to manipulate the legislators. So it's but that's the type of people that you have to, that are in those positions in the governments of the world that can't understand the concept of anti-natalism, because it's a qualitatively it's on a qualitatively different level that they're capable of understanding. So therefore, they run from that. So if you go to the politician and mention anything about ending people's lives and not procreating and having children, no support from them at all, because they want to get reelected, and besides that, they have a vague idea of the concept, but they don't know how to implement anything. So how do you get a systematic change to eliminate evolution if the people in power have IQs under 130 and that can't comprehend more than reading the newspaper in the daytime or something? And but anyways, is that answering part of the question? I sort of
ramble. No, it's okay. It's all part of it for sure. Let me ask you this. I mean, because this is obviously the end of things that people bring up the most, and some of the biggest questions revolving around this whole topic is, can we achieve sentient extinction through painless voluntary means? Is it possible? Is it a possible thing to achieve without imposing some suffering, or does pursuing extinction as a goal always come with it a discussion of how much imposed suffering is justifiable, as opposed to there being, the possibility of none at all? So, like, let me give an example. Like, if our goal is sentient extinction, we certainly, that might be very possible, through antinatalism to do with human beings, where we can get the population down to zero just from getting people to understand. But when it comes to animals, you can't convince a lion, to not have kids. And there's probably going to be some animals, deep sea fish, all different kinds of. There's definitely going to be some creatures on planet Earth that you're not going to be able to extinct through. There's a possibility you're going to end up having to kill some of them in order to achieve those goals. What do you think about that? Is that true? Is that false? Yeah.
Well, it's once the humans are gone by attrition, by not having any more procreation and children, then as that goes down to zero, to maybe the last person, and say again, it's not. No one's going to suffer, because as people die off naturally, that's why I put in. I emphasize that it's not going to create not one iota of more pain or suffering, because people just going to die off. You're just not adding more people to use up more resources to hurt more people. So as people die naturally, it gets down to one person, then when that last person is gone, the last sentient person, then you find a way to move the Earth off course just a little bit. And I saw, I can send this DVD, this YouTube thing that the scientists are saying, it's named What Happens If the Earth Stopped for 5 Seconds? If the Earth just stopped for 5 seconds, there'd be tidal waves, and earthquakes that would destroy the whole planet. All entities would die by 5 seconds, just stopping the Earth. So if you got some nuclear weapons and pushed it off course a little bit, within 5 seconds or just within a couple hours, all organisms would die. They would die so quickly there wouldn't be any pain. And so therefore, there is no suffering. There is no more added suffering. There actually is less suffering because as the population goes down from antinatalism, there's more and more resources for better hospitals and better places to live and better quality of life. So you're actually adding less pain to people. And then again, you can't. So during that time, it's only going to take about 1 or 2 generations, to attrition, because if you don't have any more children within 2 or 3 generations of maybe 80 years or 100 years at the most, there's only going to be no people left. And then at that point, you push the Earth off course just a hair, 1 degree, and eliminates all other organisms, living organisms. So, and it happens so quick that they don't have any pain. So it's like somebody coming up and shooting somebody in the back of the head. It's gone. They don't even know what's happened. So these organisms are out, and all of a sudden, just like they did when that asteroid hit the Earth. Asteroid comes down, and then all of a sudden the dinosaurs, gone. And so there's no pain, there's no suffering, no long-term suffering, just a few moments of, massive heats of 10,000 degrees. It's gone. So I don't think people can say, well, we'll leave the Earth, but we'll leave the animals and all other living organisms to just fend for themselves and suffer, because they're all going to be eaten by something larger than them. And just like last week out in Utah or Idaho, there was a man and woman out there. It was in all the newspapers, out there camping out, and this bear came and killed both of them. And they said the headlines was "Bear Feast on the Bodies of 2 Humans." So they killed 2 humans, and then for 4 hours it sat there and ate the flesh off of the 2 people. Well, that's not good. That's not good. And so in essence, if the 2 people out there, husband and wife, would have been there, then they could have killed it. It would have killed a deer or something, but it would have killed the deer alive. And while the deer was alive, the bear would have been eating the flesh off of it. Just one of those things is terrible. And and these pigs, it says here, what are the 1.5 pigs are killed to feed the growing appetite of pork, bacon, ham, and sausages, a number that has tripled in the last 50 years. Well, the research shows that pigs are intelligent animals. They actually are basically are sentient. And here they are, being in a little coop, and then going to be slaughtered with no life except going through a year or so, whatever it is, to raise them, and then they're eating a bunch of garbage, and they're in mud and filth and everything, their own excrement, and then they're picked up and put on a trailer and then killed. And there can't be any justification for allowing humans to go and having not helping the other. We're not actually taking their lives, we're helping them, to a termination.
No, I agree with you, and some version of that, as you're saying, is what I hope the future will bring, the direction that humanity will take eventually. And a winding down of the human population through antinatalism, and then whatever we have to do to take care of the rest of sentient life.
Yeah.
Just as a non-real alternative, but an idea that does get brought up, in these conversations quite often. If you were all of a sudden magically presented with a button that, if pressed, it just deleted the material universe, would you press that? Would that be a step too far? Would that be not giving? Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think and not the whole universe, it's just the Earth. And if there was a button you could push, then it would just again, all you would have to do is push a button and move the Earth about 1 degree off this orbit for 5 seconds, and everything on Earth would die. So we wouldn't even have to wait for the population to go down, and then have the last person die, and then eliminate all the living organisms on Earth by a nuclear weapon or something, knock it off course. We could do that today. Push a button and knock the Earth off maybe a half a degree for 5 seconds, and then that would spin, and everything would die within a couple hours. And so we wouldn't even have to.
Why wouldn't you want the rest of the material universe to leave? You'd want that to remain?
Well, the rest of the universe is just stars and galaxies and black holes and that, so it's not hurting anybody. It's just out there doing its thing. And so why blow up the whole universe just for a handful of 7.9 billion sentient organisms on one little piece of a rock? And the Earth is just a rock. I mean, it's just a rock. There's 8,000.
And I agree with you. So you don't believe there's any possibility of it reoccurring?
No. It's maybe some one-celled organisms or 2 or 3-celled organisms, but the Earth had the Earth just had the right place at the right time, and all scientists always say the Earth is not special in the universe. The humans are not special; they're just mutations. And so when as organisms evolved and humans evolved, they evolved by mutations. So all the humans on Earth are mutations. Or millions of, hundreds of thousands or millions of mutations that occurred over about 3.7 billion years since the first little organisms got together. But everything else, we're just mutations from, we're like the Omicron B5 variant. We're just a mutation, and each of us are different mutations because we have different abilities and different, some of us can play football, some of us can play chess. But that's because of our mutations, but to convince people that's already the mind's consumed with going to work and going to work to 8 to 5 and coming home and stopping by the food store and picking up some food and 7 o'clock eating and then watching the news and going to bed for 30 years, and then retiring and then not having any money to travel and do anything. It's what kind of life is that? But if somebody today just pushed a button and we all disappeared, not the government doing it and they live, but if everything gone, we wouldn't know the difference. And but some people say that's the religious people would say that's heresy and it's all that. But they I think they really just don't have the intelligence to be able to people say this is terrible to say, but just because we're sentient humans doesn't mean we have some super intelligence to understand everything. The mass majority of the people, probably 90%, can't handle these concepts. They just don't have the brain power. It's not that they don't want to. I mean, if you take a first grader and try to force a first grader into understanding calculus, that's immoral. That's unethical to force that person to do something when they can only feel that they failed because they can't understand these advanced concepts. And so most people think that everybody is equal and everyone has the same intelligence for the most part. Some are just a little bit more than others. Not true. I mean, 90% of the people are just don't have the mental capacity. It's not because they're bad people or something. They just the humans have not evolved enough. Not evolved. The intelligent people have not evolved or not procreated enough to have the whole population. So there's people that are born, mentally retarded, mentally handicapped. They're never going to have an IQ over 35. I mean, no matter what you do.
I do, I think that ultimately, though, all of this is a very simple argument. I do. And I think it can be deduced down to where a great number of people can understand it, a lot more than do now. I think we just have to find it. And I think we're fortunate that we have so many tools in the antinatalist toolbox, to help us get there. And I guess I don't know that you can convince everybody, but I think I do think I'm perhaps a little less pessimistic. I think there is so much that is still left to be done to convince people.
Sure, and I agree with you absolutely, but it doesn't take 90% of the people to have to understand it for the changes to be made, because no one's going to be 100% of every 8 billion or 8 billion people are going to agree, because there's each person is different. They have different backgrounds, of course, but overall and it's not saying anything bad about the human race. It's just evolution. It's just the basic facts that it takes a certain amount of intelligence to be. People can understand the idea of, say, well, too many people, that reduce population. That's simple. But to go into astrophysics and cosmology and the physiology and psychology and philosophy and that, the human 3-pound human brain. Which Einstein had 3 pounds. Everybody has like 3 pounds of stuff that looks like tofu. We all have the same weight, but some of them, and what the research shows, that Einstein and these very intelligent people, they have more of a sophisticated neurological connections. Even though they have the same number of neutrons, they have a more sophisticated. And way back when. Remember Walter Cronkite?
Sure.
Years ago?
Sure.
Mm. It's I asked some students that, and they said, "Who's that?" They didn't even know who the Beatles were. I asked some student at the university. I said, "You know the Beatles? Who are they?" But Walter Cronkite was interviewing Albert Einstein, and he said something that was significant. He said, Dr. Einstein, I feel like I'm a, relatively intelligent person, and I, meet people, I can converse with it, and I do, read a lot of, like complicated stuff. And he said, if I had an unlimited amount of resources and an unlimited amount of time, millions of dollars, billions of dollars, the rest of eternity to study. He said, would I be able to understand the theory of relativity? And Einstein looked up and said, no. And see, now the qualitative and quantitative difference in their intelligence, they're both smart people, but there's this qualitatively different level. And most people, they really don't have that capacity. I'm thinking 90%. It's not because they're retarded or anything. They just don't have the network. It's like running a Volkswagen against a Lamborghini. They both can run, and unfortunately, the Volkswagen is not going to have it. But you're looking at changing people's minds. You can't, it's impossible to change 7 billion or 7.5 billion people. It just has to be those people that could make the government or somebody say, we need to educate the people, but they need to trust us that global warming and overpopulation and climate change is going to lead us all into the masses, maybe 6 billion people or so, or 6.5 billion, into very tragic lives. And but talking to people on the street, and that is, and it's got to be, and the government, like I mentioned, the politicians don't have an IQ over 130, so they can't even understand the concept. So we can educate a lot of people, and I support that, and definitely not bringing any more life into the world. And like my one book, even Jesus Christ never asked to be born. So how can we justify it? But the religious part of it is the big preventive, because that closes their minds, and some of these other religions around the world are difficult. So, but we have to do whatever we can to. That's why I wrote those books, is to try to, at least if somebody says, "Well, you don't believe me, Mr. Senator, but here's a book. It's done by Dr. Stahl. It's done by Amanda. It's done by Dr. David, and he's he lays it out. They lay it out. So read the book if you don't want to believe me, and as a person. So, but it's an uphill battle, and I think someone has to do it. It's a moral obligation that we have. The ones that do understand the qualitative, higher level thinking of being able to piece it all together, we have a moral obligation to try to prevent as much suffering as possible.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I agree 100%. You have 3 other books around this subject. The Human Race is Actively Dying, which came out in 2021. You're Born, You Suffer, You Die, another book from 2021. And then just this year, you released another one called Humans Are Mildly Civilized, Our Universe is a Failed Existential Experiment in Intelligence. Is there anything you wanted to say about those 3 books? I apologize, perhaps we don't have enough time to speak about them individually, but...
No, they all basically have the same content, and I did write another book on astrophysics called The Vessel Theory, which has some of the same stuff in the other books, but it starts with how I thought the universe came into existence before the Big Bang, and then how it sort of like from this vessel, which by quantum fluctuations produced the fields and particles, and then these got so full that they had eruptions, and that started one universe. That came, then the main part collapsed, and then when those particles were produced, and that would burst out new universe after universe. But then I followed it through that as the universe has continued to expand, each one of them then end up with black holes, galaxies, planets, stars, and then there's Earth, and then I added the rest of my books, the other books, towards the end to say, then we started from nothing, a quantum fluctuation, and then we went. Then the end game is all, and the end is all the way at the end, where we realize as a sentient civilization that this whole thing is just meaningless, and so it would in no purpose. So the real meaning is just to go ahead and do something to prevent the suffering, because that's the underlying thing of all living organisms, and we can't just leave by ourselves. We have to eliminate to take the others with us, the organisms that can't defend themselves, and they can't understand the big picture. So we're doing the moral thing, and it's sad that we just go into nothingness. It's just that's the most tragic thing to realize.
It is. It's horribly sad. I mean, it's a terrible thing to have to realize about where life goes. But amazing work, Richard. I really consider finding your work this year to be a highlight of the year. So I mean, thank you for everything that you've done. May I ask, what are you working on currently? I mean, where do you plan on, going with all of this, in the future? And I mean, and how may I also ask, like, how can people, find you on the internet and support your work best?
Oh, well, one thing, again, I wrote the book so I wouldn't have to explain it to everybody, when I meet different people. And so I just, I got copies for myself, which I sent, like 200 copies to Stop Killing Kids. And Stop Killing Kids.
Stop having kids.
Having kids, right? Yeah,
but definitely stop killing them too. Yeah.
I'm almost brain dead here. And then also, but to give these things, but so what I'm doing now is if I read an article, I want to keep the stress off my life. So when I see an article where something's happened, where people are dying, or if there's some way, something that happens on climate change, overpopulation, global warming, and so they're saying, well, why is this happening, and how can we stop it? Then what I'll do is I'll put a copy of one of my books that's relevant, the title is relevant to that journalist, because I figure that's the best way to get it out, because these journalists are already working for Time magazine and New York Times, and they're working at CNN News, or so what I do is I go through hundreds of articles, just learning stuff every day, and then I just skim a lot of them. But when I see an article about global warming, climate change, overpopulation, and it's done by some major journalist, or maybe the people, I sent it to some people, 60 Minutes, CNN, Fox News, anybody that I think is a journalist that's writing articles on those things, and then I just send them a copy and say, for your information, and maybe they may run across something that deals with extinction and that, and so all of them are heading into extinction when they write those articles, saying that we're heading in that direction. So here I send the end game and say, this is the big picture from the beginning of the universe, and these people who are journalists are basically just sort of focused on the immediate problem of somebody starving in India. Well, because of lack of food or something, or lack of fertilizer, or global heating or warm, and so I just send it to them and think that they can take it from there. But I'm not going to convince them, because that takes a lot more time. It's easier just to take a book and a couple books and drop it in the mail, and then they get it and they look at it, and maybe a year or two from now, they say, wait a minute, maybe I'll go back to that book, and that I threw in the closet or something. And so that's what I'm basically doing. I'm not going out campaigning or giving talks or anything. I feel like we only have a few more years left to live, so we need to enjoy it. But if we can make that contribution to prevent, and then I think sending it to legislators and congressmen and senators are worthless, because they can't understand the concept. They have an IQ of less than 130, but the journalists seem to be very intelligent, and they're able to absorb massive amounts of divergent type of a dissonant type of material that that they can latch onto it, and then they have an audience of maybe 40 or 50 million people.
Yeah.
So if you can get this, some journalists, and for some major news outlet or magazine, then all they have to do is just take and go with it, because they may have a slow news day, and they have to publish something before they get fired. They look over and say, hey, this anti-natalism. Oh, this woman, Madeline. Wow. And then Dr. Stahl. Well, yeah, I think we'll call her up. We're going to interview her for 60 minutes. So I think if you contact those people, those are the people that people listen to. And some of these writers and journalists are well known in household words. So like Leslie Stahl, she's I met her up in New York this 2 or 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and she's sort of been out of the system for a while. Then she came back, and she was like 81 or 83 or something, but she looked really young and vibrant and ready to go back into action. So I'm sure she's always looking for something unique and esoteric that is to get her attention back again. But people to see her, but she's outstanding.
Richard, you are really one in quite a number of millions, my friend. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor getting to know you and your work. I think your work is extremely important, and it deserves a lot more attention than it's getting. I highly encourage everyone to go check out in the description below of this video and wherever else you're listening to this, where you can find a wide variety of links to all of Richard's books. Richard, I feel very lucky to have found out about you. Never stop talking, and thank you so much for being my guest today on the Exploring Antinatalism podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it's been my honor, and also to know that you're out there.
You can find a wide variety of books by Richard L. Stahl in the description, including the newest edition of The End of a Tragic Non-Event entitled Anti-natalism. Thank you for listening to the Exploring Antinatalism podcast. This has been Amanda Oldphan Sukenick. You can find me on the YouTube channel Antinatal Wolf. Keep up with my daily antinatalist news updates at Antinatal News on Twitter. Please follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Buzzsprout, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Amazon.com, RSS feed, and so many other platforms. Email me at exploringantinatalism@gmail.com. The podcast's website, www.exploringantinatalism.com, was designed by the amazing Visions Noirs. Please follow him at www.bionoir.com and also follow him on Instagram. Logo art by the amazing Life Sucks. Subscribe to him on YouTube and check out his merch at www.etsy.com/shop/lifesuckspublishing. Music by the wonderful I Doubt It. Subscribe to him on YouTube and check out our collaborative project along with our friend Eiffel WV, The Right to No Longer Exist, which includes the podcast, The Right to No Longer Exist, A Right to Die podcast. All the best, and bye for now.